I should have listened when the realtor avoided eye contact during the final walkthrough. I should have questioned why a 4-bedroom house in perfect condition was selling for half its market value. Most of all, I should have paid attention to the scratches on the back door deep. Deliberate gouges that started at the handle and dragged downward, as if something had been desperately trying to get inside. But I didn't, because I was 32 years old, recently divorced and desperate for a fresh start, somewhere quiet. The house sat on 3 acres at the end of Millbrook Road, surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away. It was exactly the isolation I thought I needed. I moved in on a Tuesday in late September, when the leaves were just beginning to turn, and the air carried that first sharp bite of autumn. The moving truck left around 4 o'clock, and I spent the next few hours unpacking boxes in a house that felt too big, too empty, and somehow too aware of my presence. That first night, I heard the knocking 3 deliberate raps against my bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. I told myself it was a branch, that the wind was picking up, that old houses make sounds, and I'd get used to it. But when I finally worked up the courage to look outside, I saw nothing but darkness and the black wall of trees that pressed against my property line, like a living thing. The knocking came again at 3:17 a.m. Same rhythm, same window. But this time, when I looked, I could swear I saw something pale moving between the trees, something that walked on 2 legs, but moved in a way that wasn't quite right. That was 3 weeks ago. And now, as I sit here with every light in the house blazing and my back pressed against the locked bedroom door, I realize that the knocking was just the beginning, because there is something living in the woods behind my house, and it's been watching me, learning me, waiting, and tonight, I think it's finally ready to come inside. My name is Marcus Webb, and before I moved to 47 Millbrook Road, I had what most people would consider a normal life. I worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm in Portland, lived in a decent apartment downtown, and was married to a woman named Jennifer, who I thought I'd grow old with. But Jennifer decided that growing old with her CrossFit instructor was a better option. And after the divorce was finalized, I found myself scrolling through real estate listings at 2 in the morning, looking for somewhere anywhere that didn't remind me of the life I'd lost. That's how I found the house. The listing photos showed a charming Cape Cod-style home with blue shutters, a wraparound porch, and what the description called a naturalist stream backyard. Price was absurdly low, $175,000. For a property that should have been worth at least $400,000. I called the realtor, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Holbrook, and scheduled a viewing for that weekend. Patricia met me in the driveway with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was professional, efficient, and strangely eager to get the tour over with. The house itself was immaculate, hardwood floors recently refinished, kitchen updated with stainless steel appliances, bathrooms renovated with modern fixtures. Everything was perfect. Too perfect? Has anyone lived here recently? I asked as we toured the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. Patricia hesitated for just a fraction of a second. The previous owner moved out about 6 months ago. Relocating for work? After how long? I'm sorry. How long did they live here? Another pause. About 3 months. I should have pressed further, but I was too focused on the generous closet space and the large windows that flooded the room with afternoon sunlight. We finished the tour on the back porch, where I got my first real look at the woods. They were dense and possibly dense. Pine oak and maple trees, packed so tightly together that I couldn't see more than 20 feet into the darkness beyond the tree line. The property had a small yard, maybe half an acre of cleared land, and then the forest simply began. No gradual transition, no fence, just grass, and then trees. Much land comes with the property? I asked. 3 acres total, Patricia said, consulting her tablet. Most of it is wooded. The forest extends for several miles in every direction. State land mostly. Very private. Any issues with wildlife? She smiled, and this time I noticed how tight it was, how forced. Oh, the usual. Deer, raccoons, the occasional bear. Nothing to worry about. I signed the papers 2 days later. The first week passed without incident. I unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and tried to establish some kind of routine. I set up my home office in the spare bedroom upstairs, hung my limited art collection in the living room, and even started a small garden plot near the back porch. Thinking that growing vegetables might be therapeutic, the isolation was jarring at first. In Portland, I'd grown accustomed to the constant white noise of city life traffic. Sirens, neighbors, the hum of humanity always present. Here, especially at night, the silence was profound. It pressed against the windows like a physical thing, broken only by the occasional call of an owl or the rustle of something moving through the underbrushed. I started working from home full-time, taking freelance projects that let me set my own hours. This meant spending long days alone in the house, often working late into the night. I'd always been a night owl, and the solitude didn't bother me. Or at least, I told myself it didn't. The knocking started on my 8th night in the house. I was in bed. 3 sharp raps against the window. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, which made the sound immediately unsettling. I lay there for a moment, heart suddenly pounding, trying to rationalize what I'd heard. A bird? No. Too deliberate. A branch? But there was no wind. I waited. Silence then. Tap, tap, tap. Same window. Same rhythm. I forced myself out of bed and approached the window slowly, phone in hand with the flashlight app ready. The curtains were drawn, thin cotton panels that let in ambient light during the day. I pulled one aside and aimed my phone's light into the darkness. Nothing. Just the yard below. The tree line beyond and the infinite darkness of the forest. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Old house, new sounds, that's all. I went back to bed and eventually fell into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, I examined the exterior of the house beneath my bedroom window. The wall was unblemished, no marks, no obvious place where a branch could have struck the glass. I chalked it up to settling houses do that, right? But that night it happened again. The same time I checked my phone. 3:17 a.m. Same window. 3 knocks. This time, when I looked outside, I saw something. Just for an instant. At the very edge of my phone's light, something pale moved between the trees. It was there and gone so fast I couldn't be sure I'd seen it at all. But the impression it left was deeply wrong. The shape had been roughly human, but the proportions weren't right. Too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at angles that made my stomach clench. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The rational part of my brain insisted on mundane explanations. Maybe there was a branch I hadn't noticed. Maybe local kids were playing pranks. Maybe I was experiencing some kind of stress-induced hallucination, my mind still processing the trauma of the divorce and the sudden life change. But the less rational part, the primitive part that still remembered. When humans were prey whispered something different, I started researching the property. Public records showed that the house had been built in 1987 by a family named Morrison. They'd lived there for 15 years before selling to a couple named Chen, who'd stayed for another decade. Then the house had changed hands 3 times in 5 years. Each owner had stayed for less than a year. The most recent owner, a man named David Pritchard, had indeed moved out after only 3 months. I tried to find contact information for Pritchard but came up empty. His social media profiles had been deleted or made private. It was like he'd decided to disappear. The knocking continued every night. Always at 3:17 a.m. Always 3 taps. Always the bedroom window. I started keeping my curtains closed and sleeping with noise-canceling headphones. But I could still feel it happening. Some part of me always knew when 3:17 arrived, and I'd wake up with my heart racing, knowing that something was at my window.
Ow.
Knocking. After a week of this, I decided to stay up and confront it. I sat in my bedroom with all the lights off, watching the window. A baseball bat in my lap and my phone ready to call 911. At 3:15, I positioned myself right next to the window, ready to throw open the curtains the moment I heard the knock. 3:16 came and went. I held my breath at exactly 3:17. The knocking came but not from the window. It came from inside my closet. 3 deliberate raps against the closet door, the blood drained from my face. My entire body went cold. I stared at the closet door, barely visible in the darkness, and watched as the handle slowly began to turn. I don't remember making the decision to move. Instinct took over. I bolted from the room, ran downstairs, and spent the rest of the night in my car in the driveway with the doors locked and the engine running. When the sun came up, I went back inside. The closet door was closed, the handle stationary. Everything looked normal. I checked inside, nothing but my clothes and a few storage boxes. I called Patricia Holbrook that morning. "Mr. Webb, I assure you there's nothing wrong with the house," Patricia said over the phone, her tone professionally sympathetic, but also slightly annoyed. "Old houses make sounds. The wood settles, the temperature changes, pipes expand and contract. You're just not used to living in a rural area. Give it time." "Patricia, I'm hearing knocking every night at the exact same time. Last night it came from inside my closet. There's something wrong here." A long pause. "Have you considered that you might be under a lot of stress? A divorce is traumatic. A major move is traumatic. Perhaps you should speak with—" "I'm not crazy. I didn't say you were. I'm just suggesting that sometimes our minds play tricks on us when we're dealing with significant life changes." I wanted to argue, but part of me wondered if she was right. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the isolation and the stress had pushed me into some kind of breakdown. "Can you at least tell me why the last owner left so quickly?" I asked. "I told you he relocated for work." In the middle of the night, apparently, without leaving a forwarding address. Silence on the other end. "Then, Mr. Webb, I'm not sure what you're implying, but I can assure you that I disclosed everything required by law. If you're experiencing buyer's remorse, that's unfortunately not grounds for—" I hung up. Over the next few days, I tried to establish some kind of normalcy. I took freelance projects, worked on my garden, even drove into town to buy groceries in an attempt to meet some of the locals. The nearest town, Millbrook Falls, was a small community of maybe 2,000 people. Everyone was friendly in that reserved, rural way. But when I mentioned where I lived, I noticed reactions. Nothing dramatic. Just a slight pause, a flicker in the eyes, a change in expression so subtle I might have imagined it. But it happened every time. At the hardware store, when I asked about motion sensor lights for the backyard, the clerk, a grizzled man in his 60s named Earl, gave me a long look. "You're in the house on Millbrook Road, aren't you?" he asked. "How did you know?" "Only house out that way that'd need security lights. Everything else is pretty well settled." He rang up my purchase, then added quietly, "My advice? Put M on the back of the house. Facing the trees. Why? Just seems sensible, that's all." I installed 6 motion sensor lights along the back of the house and around the perimeter of the yard. That night, they triggered 17 times between sunset and sunrise. Each time I checked, I saw nothing but darkness and trees. But the 18th time, at 3:17 a.m. exactly, the lights caught something. I was awake when the lights flared to life. I'd stopped trying to sleep through the 3:17 knocking. It was pointless. Instead, I'd taken to sitting in the living room with all the lights on, drinking coffee, and telling myself that everything was fine. The sudden brightness from the backyard flooded through the windows. I went to the sliding glass door that led to the porch and looked out. It stood at the tree line, impossibly tall, maybe 7 feet, possibly more. Stick-thin, with limbs that seemed too long, joints that bent in too many places. Its skin, if you could call it that, was the color of old bone, a sickly pale gray that seemed to absorb and reflect the security, lights in nauseating ways. But the worst part was the head. It had a head. Roughly the right size for a human, but the face was wrong. I couldn't make out details from this distance, but I could see dark hollows where eyes should be, and something that might have been a mouth that stretched too wide. Too far around the sides of the skull, it stood perfectly still, arms hanging at its sides. And I knew Ania was looking at me. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. Then, slowly, deliberately, it raised one long arm and made a gesture at the house. a knocking motion. Tap, tap, tap. Even from 60 feet away. Even through the glass in the walls, I heard the sound perfectly. 3 raps, just like every night. Then it turned and walked back into the forest. Not running, not hurrying, just walking, its 2 long legs carrying it into the darkness with an unnatural, fluid gait. The motion sensors stayed lit for another 30 seconds, then clicked off. Plunging the yard back into darkness, I stood at that door until sunrise, unable to move, unable to think clearly. When the first light of dawn touched the trees, I finally walked back to the couch and sat down, my entire body shaking. I had 2 choices. I could run pack my things, abandon the house, lose my investment, and try to rebuild my life somewhere else while questioning my sanity. Or I could figure out what the hell was happening and deal with it. I chose option 2. Not because I was brave, but because I was angry. The divorce, the move, the isolation I'd had enough of running from my problems. Whatever this thing was, whatever it wanted, I was going to face it. I just needed to understand what I was facing. The Millbrook Falls. Public Library was a small brick building on Main Street, staffed by a librarian in her 70s named Margaret Chen. The name caught my attention, same as one of the previous owners of my house. "Excuse me," I said, approaching her desk. "I'm looking for information about local history. Specifically, the area around Millbrook Road." Margaret looked up from her computer and studied me over her reading glasses. "You're the new owner of the Morrison house. How does everyone know that?" "Small town. Word travels." "What kind of information are you looking for?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm interested in the history of the property and the surrounding forest. Any unusual events or stories associated with the area." Her expression shifted, not hostile, but cautious. "What kind of unusual?" "Anything out of the ordinary? Wildlife behavior. Local legends. That sort of thing." Margaret was quiet for a moment, then stood up. "Follow me." She led me to the local history section in the back of the library, a small alcove lined with bookshelves and filing cabinets. She pulled out a folder labeled Millbrook Road Historical Documents and set it on a reading table. "This is everything we have on that area," she said. "Some of it goes back to the 1800s. You'll find it." "Interesting. Were you related to the people who owned my house?" I asked my son and daughter-in-law. "They lived there for 10 years. Why did they leave?" Margaret's expression hardened. "You should read the documents, Mr. Webb, and then you should decide whether you want to keep living there. Because every family that's tried has come to the same conclusion eventually. That house should never have been built." She walked away before I could ask more questions. I spent the next 4 hours reading through the folder. What I found made my blood run cold. The land where my house stood had a history that predated European settlement. According to documents from the late 1700s, the local indigenous tribes, specifically the Penobscot, had avoided the area for generations, calling it the watching place. The forest was considered sacred, but also dangerous. A thin place where the barrier between the physical world and something else was permeable. Early settlers largely respected this warning, leaving the land untouched. But in 1856, a man named Jeremiah Morrison, no relation to the family that eventually built my house, purchased 300 acres that included the future site of 47 Millbrook Road. He planned to clear the land for farming. Morrison's journal entries, preserved in the library's collection, documented his experience. June 12, 1856. Began clearing the south field today. The work is hard, but the land is rich. I have high hopes for this property. June 18th, 1856. Something strange occurred last night. I heard knocking at the window of my tent, though when I investigated, I found nothing. The workers claim to hear voices in the woods at night. I have attributed this to nerves and unfamiliar surroundings. June 24th, 1856. 2 of my workers have left. They refused to return, claiming they saw something watching them from the trees. I admit that I too have felt observed, though I have seen nothing concrete. July 3rd, 1856. I can no longer deny what I have seen. There is something in those woods, something that does not wish us here. It is tall, pale, and it moves in ways that defy natural law. Last night it came to my tent and looked in at me. I could see its face. God help me. I could see its face. It was smiling. July 7th, 1856. I am abandoning this project. The land is cursed. Whatever dwells in that forest has made it clear that we are not welcome. I have lost 3 workers. They simply vanished during the night. I will not sacrifice any more lives to this endeavor. Morrison left and never returned. The land remained untouched for over a century, until 1987, when Michael Morrison, a distant descendant, apparently decided to build a house there. The construction proceeded without incident, and the Morrison family lived there peacefully for 15 years, but then found Margaret Chin's testimony. It was a written statement, dated 5 years ago, detailing her son David's experience in the house. We thought the stories were superstition. My husband grew up hearing tales about the watching place, but we were educated people, not prone to believing in folklore. When we moved in, everything was fine for the first few years. Then David started hearing the knocking. Always at night, always the same pattern. We dismissed it as house sounds initially, but it became impossible to ignore. Then we started seeing it. The figure in the woods. It would stand at the tree line and watch the house for hours. Sometimes it would approach closer, testing the barriers, trying the doors and windows. We installed security systems, called the police, even contacted a priest. Nothing helped. The worst part was realizing what it wanted. It wasn't trying to hurt us, not directly. It was studying us, learning our patterns, our routines, our fears. It was patient, endlessly patient. It could wait decades if necessary. We left after it started mimicking David's voice. We would hear our son calling for help from the woods, even though he was right beside us. That's when we knew we couldn't stay. I closed the folder with shaking hands. The library was about to close, but I had one more question. I found Margaret restocking books near the front desk. Your statement says it was studying us. Studying you for what? She looked at me with something like pity. To replace us, Mr. Webb. To take our place. That's what it does. It watches, it learns, and when it knows enough, it tries to become us. Or something close enough that others might not notice right away. That's impossible, is it? You've seen it. You know something's wrong. The question is, what are you going to do about it? How do I stop it? Margaret shook her head. You don't. You leave. That's the only option that's ever worked. The thing in those woods has been there longer than this town, longer than written memory. You can't fight it. You can only survive it by getting as far away as possible. I left the library as the sun was setting, my mind reeling. Every instinct screamed at me to pack my bags and run. But I thought about the money I'd invested in the house, the fresh start I'd hoped to build, the life I was trying to create. And I thought about the thing in the woods. Patient and eternal, watching and waiting for me to flee, so it could wait for the next family. The next victim, maybe I couldn't stop it. But I could try. I spent the next week preparing. I researched everything I could find about the entity, local legends, indigenous accounts, folklore from other regions that describe similar beings. The accounts were remarkably consistent. A tall, pale figure that lived in deep forests, studied humans from a distance, and occasionally attempted to infiltrate human spaces by mimicking them. Some cultures called it a nadir or a mimic. Others had different names, the Watchers. The pale folk, the thin men, but the behavior was always the same: observation, pattern recognition, and eventually replacement. The indigenous accounts were the most detailed. The Penobscot elders had developed a complex understanding of the creatures, treating them as natural predators with their own ecological niche. They weren't evil in any moral sense, they simply were, following their nature, just as wolves or bears did. According to these accounts, the creatures were deterred by several things: fire, iron, and certain sounds or symbols that disrupted their ability to observe and mimic. They were also territorial, rarely venturing far from their chosen forest, and they had limits to their patience. If threatened or confronted directly, they would sometimes retreat not out of fear, but out of calculation. They preferred easy prey, humans who could be studied safely from a distance. I developed a plan. First, I installed more lights, not just motion sensors, but permanent floods that could turn the backyard into a stadium. I bought a generator as backup power. I reinforced all the doors and windows with additional locks and iron bars. Iron seemed to be a consistent element in the folklore. Second, 8 high-quality security cameras with night vision, covering every angle of the property. I wanted documentation, evidence, something that would prove I wasn't insane if I survived this. Third, I prepared to confront it. I built a large bonfire pit in the backyard, stocked it with wood, and set up portable speakers connected to my phone. I downloaded recordings of human voices, dozens of people talking, laughing, shouting, creating a cacophony of sound that would, I hoped, confuse the entity's ability to isolate and mimic. Individual voices, my plan was simple. Force it out of the woods and into the open. Create an environment where observation was impossible, and make it clear that I wasn't easy prey. Either it would retreat, or I tried not to think about the or. On Saturday night, 1 month after moving into the house, I put my plan into action. I started the bonfire at dusk. The flames climbed 20 feet high, casting dancing shadows across the yard and turning the tree line into a wall of flickering orange and black. I turned on every light in and around the house. I set the speakers to full volume and started the audio playback, a constant stream of human voices, overlapping and chaotic. Then I waited. The entity appeared at 9:47 p.m. Much earlier than its usual 3:17 a.m., it emerged from the trees slowly, its pale form seeming to resist the light, its movements hesitant. It was clearly disturbed by the fire, the noise, the sudden change in its observation routine. I stood on the back porch, my heart hammering, and watched it approach the edge of the firelight. This close, maybe 30 feet away, I could see it more clearly than ever before. Its proportions were definitely wrong, the torso too long, the limbs too thin, the joints connecting at slightly incorrect angles. Its head was more ovoid than round, and its face, God, its face was trying to be human, but failing. It had approximations of eyes, a nose, a mouth, but they were in the wrong places, sized incorrectly, moving independently of each other. It was trying to look human, learning how, and failing. We stared at each other across the fire. I could see it, calculating, processing, trying to understand this new situation. It had been watching me for weeks, learning my routines, my patterns, my behaviors. But this was unprecedented in its experience. I'd become unpredictable. Then it spoke. Marcus, it said, and the voice was wrong, perfect imitation of my own voice. But coming from that not quite human mouth, distorted by that too long throat. Marcus, why are you doing this? Every hair on my body stood up. Hearing my own voice from that thing's mouth was more disturbing than anything else I'd experienced. You're not welcome here, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. This is my home. You need to leave. Its head tilted at an angle that would have broken a human neck. Marcus, it said again. And this time the voice changed. It was Jennifer's voice, my ex-wife's voice. Marcus, I made a mistake. Come into the woods with me. We can talk. We can fix this. You're not her, Marcus. My mother's voice now, dead for 5 years. Marcus, sweetheart, I'm here. I've been waiting for you. Come to the trees. Stop. It cycled through voices. My father, old friends, colleagues. People from my past that it couldn't possibly know about unless it had been watching me far longer than I'd realized. Each voice perfect. Each one trying to pull me closer. Trying to lure me away from the light and into the darkness where it could do. Whatever it did, I grabbed a burning branch from the fire and held it up like a torch. I said leave. The entity stopped cycling through voices. It stood perfectly still, and I could see something in those not quite right eyes. Not fear, it didn't seem capable of fear, but calculation, assessment, a predator deciding whether the prey was worth the effort. Then it smiled. At least it tried to smile. Its mouth stretched in a way that was supposed to be friendly, supposed to be human, but was instead the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. I can wait, it said in my voice. I've waited before. I'll be here tomorrow. And the next day, and the day after that. Forever, Marcus? Because you can't stay awake forever. You can't keep the fires burning forever. Eventually, you'll slip. You'll make a mistake. You'll leave a window unlocked, or a door unbarred, and I'll be ready. It turned and walked back into the trees. Disappearing into the darkness beyond the firelight, I stood there until dawn. Feeding the fire, keeping the lights blazing. The voices playing, and I realized Margaret Chen was right. I couldn't fight this thing. Not really. I could resist it, frustrate it, make myself difficult prey, but I couldn't make it leave. It would be there in those woods, watching and waiting. For as long as I remained in the house, as the sun rose, I made my decision. I would finish this. I didn't sleep that day. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, that horrible, wrong attempt at human expression stretching across an inhuman face. I heard my own voice coming from its mouth. Promising to wait forever? By noon, I'd made coffee, reviewed the security footage from the night before, and confirmed what I already knew. The entity was real, it was documented, and I had proof. But proof of what? A tall, pale figure that stood at the edge of my property. Without context, without the full experience, the footage just looked like something. Maybe a person in a costume. Maybe a trick of light and shadow. No one would believe me. And even if they did, what could they do? I called my only friend in the area, a guy named Tom Reeves I'd met at the hardware store. He was a local contractor, mid-40s, with the kind of practical, no-nonsense attitude that came from years of fixing real problems. We'd had coffee a few times, and he seemed like someone who might listen without immediately calling for a psychiatric evaluation. Tom, it's Marcus. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Sure. What's up? Have you ever been in the woods behind my house? A long pause. No, no one goes in there, Marcus. Why not? Another pause, longer this time. You know why? Everyone knows why. The question is, why are you asking? I told him. Not everything. I didn't mention the confrontation the night before, but enough. The knocking, the figure, the history I'd discovered at the library. Tom listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for almost a minute. You still there? I asked. Yeah, I'm here, Marcus. I'm going to tell you what I tell everyone who asks about that place. My grandfather used to trap in those woods back in the 30s. He saw things, experienced things. He told me that the forest has rules, and one of those rules is that you don't go deep. You don't go past where the sunlight reaches. You definitely don't go to the center. The center? There's a place about 3 miles into the woods. Old-growth forest. Trees that were there before Europeans arrived, maybe before humans at all. My grandfather called it the heart. He said that's where they come from. The Watchers. And he said that if you ever wanted to deal with them permanently, you'd have to go there. Deal with them how? He never said. It's just that there was a way, but the cost was high. Marcus, please tell me you're not thinking about going in there? I didn't answer. Marcus, don't. Just leave. Sell the house at a loss. Walk away. Start over somewhere else. It's not worth it. I can't keep running, Tom. I ran from my marriage. I ran from Portland. I ran from everything. I'm done running. This isn't about pride or bravery. This is about survival. Those things. Whatever they are, they've been in those woods for centuries. They'll be there for centuries more. You're just one person. You can't change that. Maybe not. But I can try. Will you help me? Help you do what? Help me go to the heart? Tom was silent for so long, I thought he'd hung up. Then, you're serious. Completely when? Tomorrow. I need 1 day to prepare. Another long silence. We'll come by at dawn. We go in during daylight. We stay together, and at the first sign of trouble, we turn back. Agreed? Agreed? And Marcus? Real weapons. Real weapons. I don't know if they'll help, but I'd rather have them and not need them than the alternative. I spent the rest of Sunday gathering supplies, flashlights, batteries, rope, a compass, a GPS unit, flares, a hunting knife. And after significant internal debate, a shotgun I'd inherited from my father. I'd never fired it, barely knew how to use it, but Tom's warning about weapons made sense. I also spent time studying maps of the forest. The state land extended for nearly 10 square miles, most of it designated as protected wilderness. There were no trails, no marked paths, no official access points. Going 3 miles into that terrain would be genuinely dangerous, even without the supernatural element. As evening approached, I went back to the library. Margaret Chen was still there, reshelving books in the local history section. She looked up as I entered, and her expression immediately shifted to concern. "Mr. Webb, you look terrible. I need to know about the heart." Her face went pale. "Who told you about that?" "Tom Reeves. His grandfather knew about it." Margaret set down the book she'd been holding and gestured for me to follow her to a back office. She closed the door and turned to face me. "You're planning to go there?" "I am. That's suicide." "Maybe, but I need to understand what I'm dealing with. The thing in those woods has been watching me, studying me, trying to replace me. I can't live like that. I won't." Margaret sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of her 70-plus years. "My son wanted to go to the heart, too. I convinced him not to. I told him it wasn't worth the risk. He listened to me, and we left instead. But sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice." "Why?" "Because we brought it with us." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. "What do you mean?" I asked. "After we left the house, after we moved to Boston, David started seeing it again. Not every night, but occasionally. Standing outside his apartment window, following him on the street, always at a distance, always watching. It followed us, Mr. Webb, because we ran before it was finished studying us." Jesus Christ. The indigenous accounts mention this. Entities don't give up easily once they've chosen a subject. They're patient. They can follow you for years, even decades, waiting for their opportunity. The only people who escaped permanently were those who went to the heart and did something. The accounts aren't clear on what exactly. They came back changed, and the watchers never bothered them again. "What kind of changed?" Margaret opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a photograph. It showed a young Native American man, probably in his early 20s, standing in front of a log cabin. His expression was calm but distant, and his eyes had a quality that was hard to define, like he was looking at something far away. Something the camera couldn't capture. This is Samuel Crow, a Penobscot elder who dealt with a watcher in 1923. According to his testimony, he went to the heart alone and stayed there for 3 days. When he came back, he never spoke about what he experienced, but the entity that had been following him was gone. He lived another 40 years and died peacefully in his sleep. But he was different. Yes. His family said he was quieter, more contemplative. He would stare into the distance for hours, and he refused to ever go back into deep woods for the rest of his life. What did he do there at the heart? I don't know, but I have his journal. She pulled a leather-bound notebook from the same drawer. It's in Penobscot mostly, but I had portions translated. You should read it before you go. It might help. Or it might convince you to abandon this insane plan. She handed me the journal. The leather was cracked and worn, the pages yellowed with age. I opened it carefully. Thank you, Margaret. Don't thank me yet. You may end up cursing my name before this is over. I spent that night reading Samuel Crow's journal. Margaret had provided translations of the key passages. What I read was both enlightening and terrifying. Day 1. I have entered the deep woods to confront the watcher that has plagued my family. I carry sage, tobacco, and prayers. The forest changes the deeper one goes. The trees grow larger, older. The light becomes strange. Feel observed from all directions. Day 1. Evening. I've reached what the elders call the heart. It is a clearing, circular, perhaps 100 feet across. At the center stands a single tree unlike any I have seen. Its bark is pale, almost white, and its branches reach up and out in patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is where they come from. I can feel it day 2. I slept poorly. Dreams. Of voices calling my name, of figures moving at the edge of vision. When I woke, there were footprints around my camp in patterns that made no sense. They watched me even here, especially here. Day 2, afternoon. I have seen them, not one but many. They move through the trees around the clearing, never entering it, never leaving it. They are waiting for something. I think they are waiting for me to understand. Day 2, evening. I performed the ritual the elders taught me. I cannot write the details here. Some knowledge is too dangerous to record. But I made an offering. I spoke the words. I opened myself to understanding what they are and why they watch us. Day 3. It showed me. God help me, it showed me everything. They are not evil. They are not demons. They are observers, witnesses. They existed before us and will exist after us. They watch because that is their purpose, to observe, to record, to remember. But sometimes in their watching they become fascinated. They try to understand us by becoming us. They do not mean harm, but they do not understand harm. They are outside such concepts. Day 3, evening. I have made peace with them. I offered myself as a willing subject of observation in exchange for my family's safety. They accepted. I will carry the Watcher with me for the rest of my life, but it will not threaten those I love. It will only watch, only remember. This is the price. This is the way. The journal ended there. I sat back, my mind reeling. Samuel Crow hadn't defeated the entity. He'd negotiated with it. He'd offered himself as a permanent subject of study in exchange for his family's protection. Was that the only option? Was that what I'd have to do? I thought about spending the rest of my life being watched, being studied, being followed by something inhuman that existed only to observe. The idea was horrifying, but it was better than running forever. Better than having it follow me from place to place, always present, always learning, always waiting. I barely slept that night. When dawn came, I was already awake, already dressed, already standing on the back porch with my supplies packed and ready. Tom arrived at 6:15 a.m. in a battered pickup truck. He looked as exhausted as I felt. Last chance to back out, he said. I'm not backing out. He nodded. Then let's get this over with. We entered the forest at 6:30 a.m., just as the sun was rising above the tree line. The temperature was cool, the air crisp with the smell of pine and decaying leaves. For the first 100 yards, it was almost pleasant, just a walk through the woods on a beautiful autumn morning. Then the forest changed. It was subtle at first. The trees grew larger, their trunks thicker, their canopy denser. The underbrush became more tangled, harder to navigate. The light took on a strange quality, filtering through the leaves and shafts that seemed almost solid, almost visible. In the silence, God, the silence. No birds, no insects, no rustling of small animals in the undergrowth. Just the sound of our footsteps and our breathing and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. How far to the heart? I asked, keeping my voice low without consciously deciding to, according to my grandfather's directions, about 3 miles due west. But the terrain is rough. Could take us 3 or 4 hours. We walked in silence for a while, following a compass bearing deeper into the forest. Tom led the way, cutting through dense undergrowth with a machete. While I followed and kept watch on our surroundings, after about an hour, I started seeing them. Pale shapes moving between the trees, always at the edge of vision. Always just far enough away that I couldn't make out details. Sometimes one, sometimes several. They paralleled our path, keeping pace with us, never approaching but never falling behind. Tom, I said quietly, they're following us. I know. Don't look directly at them. Don't acknowledge them. Just keep moving. We pressed on. The forest grew darker as the canopy thickened overhead. The trees were enormous now, ancient things with trunks 10 feet across and bark that seemed to absorb light. I checked my GPS unit and found that the signal was spotty. It's cutting in and out. At 2 hours in, we found the first marker. It was a Kurna stack of stones about 3 feet high, clearly man-made. Carved into the top stone was a symbol I didn't recognize, some kind of spiral pattern that seemed to shift when I looked at it directly. Trail marker, Tom said. My grandfather mentioned these. They mark the path to the heart. We follow them from here. We found another cairn 200 yards later, then another, forming a path through the trackless forest. With each marker, the sense of being watched intensified. I could feel eyes on my back, on my sides, on every exposed inch of skin. The pale figures grew more numerous, forming a loose circle around us as we walked. At the 3-hour mark, exhausted and on edge, we found the clearing. The clearing appeared suddenly, the dense forest simply ending at a perfect circle of open ground. It was exactly as Samuel Crow had described, roughly 100 feet across, carpeted with moss that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and at the center stood the tree. It was massive, easily 15 feet in diameter at the base, rising up and up until its branches disappeared into a canopy so thick I couldn't see the sky. But the most striking thing was its bark pill white, almost luminous. It was covered in patterns that looked random at first, but resolved into shapes if I looked too long. Faces, limbs, bodies, all flowing and merging and separating in endless variation. The pale figures stood at the edge of the clearing, a silent audience of watchers forming a complete circle around us. There had to be 30 of them, maybe more, all perfectly still, all observing. Jesus Christ, Tom whispered. I stepped into the clearing. The moment my foot touched the moss, I felt something change. A shift in pressure, in temperature, in the quality of the air itself. This was a thin place, just as the indigenous accounts had described. A place where the barrier between our world and something else was permeable. What do we do now? Tom asked. I pulled out Samuel Crow's journal and read his description of the ritual again. It was vague, more poetic than instructive, but the general idea was clear, an offering words of respect, and an opening of oneself to understanding. I approached the tree slowly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The pale figures watched, but didn't move. When I was 10 feet from the trunk, I stopped. I'm here, I said, my voice sounding small and fragile in the silence. I came to understand, to make peace. Nothing happened. The figures remained motionless. The tree stood silent and ancient. I tried again. You've been watching me, studying me. I want to know why. I want to know what you want. Still nothing. Behind me, Tom shifted nervously. Marcus, maybe we should. One of the figures stepped into the clearing. It was the same one that had come to my house. It's the one I'd confronted across the bonfire. Up close, in daylight, it was somehow even more disturbing. Its pale skin had a translucent quality, revealing structures underneath that weren't quite muscles or bones, but something in between. Its face was a mask of human features, arranged in an approximation of normalcy that failed utterly. It walked toward me with that same fluid, wrong gait I'd seen before. When it was 5 feet away, it stopped and regarded me with those dark, hollow eyes. Then it spoke. Not in my voice this time, but in something that might have been its own voice, a sound like wind through hollow trees, like ice cracking on a frozen lake, like distant thunder. Observer, it said. Witness, recorder. I don't understand. It raised one long arm and pointed at the tree, then at itself, then at me. We watch. We learn. We remember. This is purpose. This is function. You are interesting. You are studied. Why me? Not you. Humans. All humans. We watch all who enter the forest. Most leave. Some stay. We learn from those who stay. What do you learn? How you live. How you change. How you end. We record. We preserve. When all is gone, we remain. We remember. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. You're preserving us? Like specimens? Observing, understanding. When you are gone, we will remember what you were in the mimicry. Trying to become us? The entity tilted its head. To understand, we must experience. To experience, we must be. We try, we fail. We continue trying. You scared me. You terrified me. Fear is part of being. We observe fear. We try to understand fear. We succeed only in creating it. This is error. This is learning. Despite everything, despite the horror and the terror and the weeks of sleepless nights, I felt something unexpected. Pity. These things weren't monsters. They were observers trying desperately to understand something fundamentally outside their nature. They were studying us the way scientists might study an alien species, but without the framework to truly comprehend what they were seeing. What happens if I stay in my house? I asked. Will you keep watching me? Yes, until understanding is complete, or until you leave, or until you end. How long would that take? Years, decades, until you end naturally. It's not acceptable. I can't live like that. The entity was silent for a long moment. Then, there is alternative. What alternative? It pointed at the tree again. You may enter. You may understand us as we try to understand you. Exchange of observation. Balance. Enter the tree. What does that mean? Experience what we experience. See what we see? For one day, you become observer. You watch. You witness. You remember? Then you return. And we are balanced. We watch you no more. I looked at the massive pale tree, at the patterns writhing across its bark, the dark hollow at its base that might have been a doorway, or might have been nothing at all. And if I refuse, we continue watching, learning, forever. Tom grabbed my shoulder. Marcus, don't. You don't know what's in there? You don't know what it'll do to you. He was right. I had no idea what entering the tree meant, what I'd experience, what it might cost me. But I thought about Samuel Crow, who'd made his own bargain and lived peacefully for 40 more years. I thought about the alternative, spending the rest of my life being watched, being studied, never having privacy or peace. How do I know you'll keep your word? I asked the entity. We do not lie. We do not deceive. We observe, we record, we remember. This is truth. This is law. I took a deep breath and made my decision. I'll do it, I said. One day, 24 hours, and then we're even. You leave me alone forever. The entity Noda, gesture it had learned from watching humans, performed with eerie precision. Agreed. Enter when ready. We will guide. Tom tried to stop me. Marcus, this is insane. You don't have to do this. We can leave. We can find another way. There is no other way, Tom. You know that. Either I do this, or I spend the rest of my life being stalked by something I can't escape. I put my hand on his shoulder. Go back. Wait at the house. If I'm not back in 24 hours, tell my story. Make sure people know what happened here, Marcus. Please. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 24 hours. I'll be waiting. I watched him leave the clearing, disappearing into the forest with one last backward glance. Then I turned to face the tree. The entity gestured toward the dark hollow at the tree's base. Up close, I could see it was definitely an opening, a gap in the wood that descended downward into darkness. Enter, descend. We will show you. I stepped forward, my legs shaking, my heart hammering. At the threshold of the hollow, I paused and looked back at the circle of watchers. They all stood motionless, observing, recording this moment just as they'd recorded countless moments before. Then I stepped into the darkness and began to descend. I can't fully describe what happened in the tree. Human language isn't adequate for the experience. Human perception too limited. But I'll try. The descent was longer than it should have been. The hollow deeper than the tree's visible roots could account for. I climbed down into darkness, feeling wood grain beneath my hands that seemed to shift and move. The air grew cold, then warm, then cold again. time became strange. When I reached the bottom, I found myself in a space that defied geometry. It was both vast and cramped, both bright and dark, both empty and full, and I was no longer alone. The entities they're not just the one I'd spoken with, but dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands. They surrounded me in layers of presence that extended in directions I couldn't name. And they were showing me things, memories, observations, recordings. I saw the forest as it had been 1,000 years ago, 1,000, 10,000. I saw indigenous peoples moving through the trees, hunting, gathering, living. I saw the first Europeans arrive, cutting and building and changing. I saw families in the house that would become mine, the Morrisons. The Chens, David Pritchard, others whose names I didn't know. But more than that, I saw how the entities saw us. To them, we were beautiful and incomprehensible. Our emotions, our relationships, our brief, passionate lives burning so bright and ending so soon. They watched us love and hate and create and destroy, and they tried desperately to understand why we did these things. They were eternal observers of temporary beings, forever outside the experience of living, forever trying to understand what it meant to be alive. They showed me their attempts to mimic us, to become us. I saw them practicing human movements, human expressions, human speech. I saw their failures, the uncanny valley of almost but not quite right, that terrified those who witnessed them. They didn't understand why their attempts at becoming human frightened us. They were simply trying to learn, and I understood they weren't evil. They were doing what they were made to do, observing, recording, preserving, when humanity was gone. When our cities crumbled and our civilizations faded, these entities would remain, eternal witnesses holding the memory of what we'd been. It was beautiful and terrible and sad. Beyond measure, time passed strangely. Ours became moments. Moments became ours. I lost track of how long I'd been in that space, but eventually I felt a change, a pulling, a calling back. The entities were showing me one final thing: myself. I saw Marcus Webb through their eyes, a damaged man seeking escape, running from pain, from failure, from connection, choosing isolation because he'd been hurt and didn't want to be hurt again. I saw my patterns, my habits, my defenses. I saw how small my world had become, how much I'd closed myself off from possibility, and I saw what I could be instead. It wasn't a vision of the future or a promise of change. It was simply an observation. Here's what you are. Here's what you could be. The choice, as always, was mine. Then I was climbing back up, back toward the light, back toward the world of humans and time and change. The ascent was quicker than the descent. Or maybe I was just more eager to return. When I emerged from the hollow, blinking in the dim forest light, I found that night had fallen. The clearing was empty, except for one entity, my watcher, the one who'd studied me. "It is done," it said in that hollow tree voice. "You have observed. We have been observed. Balance is achieved. You'll leave me alone now. Yes. We will watch others. We will learn from others. You are free to live without observation. This is agreement. This is law." I stood on shaking legs, my mind still reeling from what I'd experienced. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. The entity tilted its head. "You understand now. If you understand, you will remember. You will carry this knowing. As we carry memory of you, will I be different, like Samuel Crow? All who enter are changed. Change is nature of experience, but you remain you. Only now you see wider, remember deeper, understand better." The entity turned and walked to the edge of the clearing. Before it disappeared into the trees, it looked back one final time. "Live well, Marcus Webb, be alive. This is a gift we cannot have. Do not waste it." Then it was gone, melting into the darkness. And I was alone in the heart of the forest. I found my way back to Tom, using the GPS unit and sheer determination. The journey took hours in the dark, stumbling through undergrowth, following the cairns in reverse. but I felt no fear. The watchers were gone. The forest was just a forest again. Tom was waiting at my house, sitting on the porch with a shotgun across his lap and a thermos of coffee at his side. When he saw me emerge from the tree line, he jumped up and ran to meet me. Jesus Christ, Marcus. It's been 36 hours. I was about to call the police, organize a search party. 36 hours? I checked my phone. He was right. I'd been in the tree for a day and a half, though it had felt both shorter and infinitely longer. Are you okay? What happened? Did they hurt you? No, they didn't hurt me. They showed me. Tom, I understand now. I understand what they are, what they want, and it's over. They're gone. We went inside. I showered, changed, ate for the first time in 2 days, while Tom watched me with concern and confusion. Then I told him everything: the descent, the visions, the understanding I'd gained. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. So they're really gone? They'll leave you alone? They'll leave me alone. They'll continue watching others, observing, learning. But I'm free. Okay, after everything you saw? I considered the question. Was I okay? I'd been inside something beyond human understanding. Seen reality from an inhuman perspective, been changed in ways I was still processing. But I also felt lighter, clearer, more present than I'd been in years. Yeah, I said finally. I think I am. The weeks after my experience in the heart passed quietly. The knocking never returned. The pale figures never appeared at the tree line. The forest behind my house became just a forest, beautiful, peaceful, normal. But I was different. I noticed things I'd never noticed before. The way light filtered through leaves. The patterns birds made when they flew. The subtle expressions on people's faces that revealed their inner emotional states. I saw the world with greater clarity, greater depth, greater appreciation. I also noticed my own patterns more clearly. The walls I'd built. The ways I isolated myself. The opportunities for connection I'd rejected out of fear. So I started making changes. I joined the community center in Millbrook Falls. I volunteered at the library, helping Margaret Chin with local history projects. I had dinner with Tom and his family once a week. I even started dating a Guinea woman named Sarah who worked at the coffee shop in town, who had a kind smile and didn't push when I said I needed to take things slow. I kept the house. That surprised some people, including Tom, who assumed I'd want to sell and move after everything that had happened. But the house felt different now. It was mine, truly mine, without the shadow of observation hanging over it. The woods behind it were no longer threatening, but beautiful. A reminder of the mystery and wonder that existed just beyond human understanding. I also started writing. This account, first documenting what happened as clearly and honestly as I could. But also fiction, stories, explorations of the thin places where the normal and the abnormal touched. It turned out I had a knack for it. My first story was published in a small horror magazine. Then another. Then another. I found a new kind of peace in Millbrook Falls. Not the isolation I'd originally sought, but genuine connection with a community, with friends, with the possibility of love. I'd spent so long running from pain that I'd forgotten how to run toward joy. The entities, in their strange way, had taught me to see that. It's been a year since I descended into the heart. A year since I made my bargain with the Watchers. A year since I emerged changed but whole. I'm sitting on my back porch now, watching the sun set over the forest. Sarah is beside me, her hand in mine, talking about her day at work. Inside, dinner is cooking. We're having Tom and his family over tonight. Tomorrow, I'm teaching a writing workshop at the community center. Life is good. Not perfect. Life is never perfect, but good in ways I couldn't have imagined a year ago. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the entities. I wonder who they're watching now, what they're learning, whether they're still trying to understand what it means to be human. I hope they succeed someday, though I suspect the answer will always elude them. Some things can only be understood by experiencing them, and experience requires the possibility of ending. That's the gift and the curse of mortality. I also think about the others who came before Miss Samuel. Crow, and the countless unnamed people who faced the Watchers and survived. We're a scattered tribe, those of us who've been to the thin places and returned. We carry the memory of what we saw, the knowledge of what exists beyond the everyday world. It's a heavy burden sometimes, but it's also a gift. Because once you've seen how vast and strange and wonderful reality truly is, you can never go back to sleepwalking through life. Every moment becomes precious. Every connection meaningful. Every sunrise a miracle. The sun touches the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The forest darkens, becoming a wall of shadows that holds secrets and wonders I'll never fully understand. And that's okay. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be witnessed, respected, and remembered. Sarah squeezes my hand. What are you thinking about? I smile. How lucky I am. Lucky? After everything that happened, especially because of everything that happened, it led me here. To this porch, this moment, you. I wouldn't change it. She leans her head on my shoulder, and we watch the last of the light fade from the sky. Inside, the timer goes off. Tom's truck pulls into the driveway. Life continues, beautiful and mundane, and infinitely precious. There's something living in the woods behind my house. But it's not watching me anymore. It's moved on to other subjects, other studies, other observations. And I'm free to live my life without the weight of inhuman eyes tracking my every move. I survived the Watchers. More than that, I learned from them. They taught me to observe my own life with the same care and attention they brought to their eternal vigil. They taught me that being truly seen isn't always frightening. Sometimes it's a path to understanding yourself. And they taught me that the scariest monsters aren't always the ones in the woods. Sometimes they're the walls we build around our own hearts, the fears that keep us from connection, the isolation we choose because we're afraid of being hurt. I've torn down those walls now. I've chosen connection over isolation, vulnerability over safety, life over mere existence. The forest will always be there, dark and deep and full of mysteries. But it's not my enemy. It's simply other different from me, operating by rules I don't fully comprehend, existing in ways I can't quite grasp, and that's beautiful too. As we head inside for dinner, take one last look at the trees. Somewhere in that darkness, the Watchers continue their eternal vigil. They observe, they record, they remember. And when humanity is finally gone, when our cities crumble and our stories fade, they'll still be there, holding the memory of what we were. It's comforting in a way, to know that we'll be remembered, that our brief, brilliant existence won't simply vanish into the void. The Watchers will preserve us, not in museums or monuments, but in the eternal record of their observation. We are seen, we are known, we are remembered. And for now, while we're still here, still alive, still capable of change, and growth and connection, we might as well make our observation worth recording. I close the door on the forest and turn toward the warmth and light and love waiting inside. The Watchers may continue their vigil forever, but I'm done being watched now. Finally, I'm ready to live. If you're reading this, you might be wondering if my story is true. If there really are things in the woods that watch and learn and try to become us, I can't answer that for you. I can only tell you what I experienced, what I learned, what I chose to do with that knowledge. But I will say this: pay attention to the forests near your home. Notice if the silence gets too deep, if the shadows move in ways they shouldn't, if you feel eyes on you when you're alone. These might be signs. They might be nothing. And if you do encounter something, if you hear knocking at 3:17 a.m., if you see pale figures at the tree line, if you feel the weight of inhuman observation, remember that fear is natural, but understanding is possible. The Watchers aren't evil. They're just other, different, operating by rules we don't fully comprehend. And sometimes, if you're brave enough, you can make peace with the other. You can find balance. You can transform terror into understanding. It won't be easy. It might change you in ways you can't predict. But it's possible. I'm living proof. There's something living in the woods, behind my house. But it's not watching me anymore, and I've never been more alive.